Hello, I'm Toycat and welcome back to the second channel geography video. This is a series where I talk about geography and the world and stuff. And today I wanted to talk about borders again because as you're all probably aware by now, if you subscribe to the channel, I like talking about borders a lot and a lot of people have been enjoying this series where we talk about every single border that a country does have. So I figured why not bring it to Belgium. So Belgium is a country which you're probably aware of for a whole bunch of different reasons. But one of the things you might not know about Belgium is that it has some of the wildest borders in the world. So to give you a very brief preview of what's going on with their borders, they have this situation right here. Yes, this is their real border with the Netherlands. There are parts of Belgium which are inside of the Netherlands entirely, and then there are parts of the Netherlands entirely inside of Belgium, inside of the Netherlands. It's a very real thing which has very real consequences, and we're going to be talking about that, as well as the most recent land swap in the world, which is between Belgium and the Netherlands. Just this year, 2018, they agreed to swap some land. They changed their border. Again, peacetime border changes, you might not think are real, but Belgium and the Netherlands did it, so Belgium got a bit smaller this year, and we also have the very strange situation of two parts of Germany which are cut off by a stretch of the Belgium which is only 30 meters wide. There is a 30-meter wide gap between Germany and Germany again in 6 separate places, and the official reason is, it's a railway-shaped gap, but in my head it's a snake-shaped border. So yeah, we have a snake-shaped border I'll be explaining, as well as all of these other things between Belgium and Germany, and yeah, I wanted to talk about all of these borders and more today, which by the way, hopefully you all do enjoy. So one quick thing I want to go with first is that I feel like this is a perfect antithesis of the last border video we did, which was about Singapore. Singapore is a country which, was kind of kicked out of the federation it was in. It then had to kind of build a Singaporean national identity from scratch, build the country as a whole from scratch, and then turn it into something which is now very proud and successful. Belgium is kind of the opposite. Without sounding like I'm making a dig, Belgium, obviously got their independence in the Belgian Revolution of 1830. They fought for it, they freed themselves from the Netherlands, they became a country, and since then, they've kind of built more and more divides with themselves to the extent where Belgium doesn't really want to be Belgium anymore. And as ridiculous as it sounds to say a country doesn't want to exist, let me give you the example of the largest political party in Belgium. So this is the New Flemish Alliance. They're the largest party right now, and this is direct from the Wikipedia page. No editorializing. It's just the New Flemish Alliance. Are a regionalist and separatist movement that self-identifies with civic nationalism, and it's part of the Flemish movement, which strives for peaceful, gradual secession of Flanders from Belgium. They want to have half of the Belgium secede from the rest of it, and in recent years, it's become the largest party, not only in Flanders, the region which is trying to secede, which obviously makes sense, but of Belgium as a whole, and it leads the current government. There's a real legit thing. Admittedly, it's like a coalition government, and Belgium has issues with that as a whole time. But yeah, Belgium has the situation where they literally don't have governments for sometimes more than a year at a time, just because it's so hard for the two regions to get along. And there's lots of consequences of that. But yeah, Belgium has some issues with national unity, which you could argue is kind of a good thing in some ways, because it means, like, national unity is good in some places, but not necessarily the perfect thing. But I'm still going to be talking about the country, which is very much divided. So a key thing before we go forwards is the fact that, by the way, this is going to be a long video. I'm sure you're aware by now, but just in case, long video coming up here. But yeah, one of the things to keep in mind here is the fact that Belgium is divided into two main regions. There's the Dutch-speaking north, and there, the Flemish parts, Flanders, and there is the French-speaking south, known as Wallonia. They're the two major regions of Belgium. Brussels is an international zone where they speak more French than Dutch, even though they're a Dutch exclave, but they nowadays speak a lot of English as well. And then there are German parts of Belgium as well, so it gets very complex. The language thing is, it's a very multi-language country, and I think that's kind of cool, actually, because if we start with the Belgium-Netherlands border, the way most of this was determined, because it starts here, by the way, bordering Zeeland in the Netherlands, which, just as a fun little fact, Zeeland is like the Zealand that New Zealand was named after. So this is like Zeeland Classic. So Zeeland Classic and the Belgian border was, determined entirely by the provincial lines, because Zeeland and most of the provinces to the north of this line were the Protestant, because the United Kingdom of the Netherlands was set up basically as, the Netherlands and all of its, including Belgium and Luxembourg, countries that are now known as Benelux, as you might know. But yeah, basically Benelux used to be one big country. It used to be the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, and mostly Protestant, or it was a Dutch version of Protestantism, but let's just keep it that way. The mostly Protestant regions stayed with the Netherlands, and the mostly Catholic ones decided to revolt and become free. That is how, French and Dutch-speaking people became part of the same country, because back then religion was the way bigger dividing line between countries than it was there. So that is how most of this border was drawn. It was the provincial borders between the different provinces of the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, which is how most of the border takes its shape. That's why it has some very weird juts in and out, because Catholic regions versus Protestant regions. And then you get the very weird situation of Bal-Hertog and Bale Nassau. So yeah, these are, this is a French and a Dutch word, so forgive my pronunciations, but I do want to talk about this place right here because it is the strangest border situation perhaps in the world. Now that India and Bangladesh have fixed theirs, this is one of the remaining just bizarre situations where you have two countries which just have borders which interlock into each other non-stop. So there are two separate villages here, but they're functionally to the outside world. One, there is the Dutch village of Bale-Hertog, and there is the Belgian village of, there is the Dutch village of Bale-Nassau, and there is the Belgian village of Bale-Hertog. So this is a Flemish village, which is taking place over this land right here, whereas the Dutch village takes place over this land right here. So yeah, basically there is a village inside the village, but the two villages are kind of one. And how does this happen? And the simple explanation is this goes back to before national borders existing how they were today. Back when there was two separate villages that were next to each other, it used to be that one lord owned one of the Holy Roman Empire lords to be precise, owned one, and it used to be that another owned the other. And then over time they started switching land because someone had allegiance to one lord over the other, and the very end situation ended up because most of the farmland regions and most of the industrial regions ended up with one side, and most of the rest of the regions ended up with the other, which leads to the situation where if they're because if you look at a lot of the these exclaves, this is a part of Belgium inside the Netherlands, but it's literally just a random field. There's no access to it besides going through the Netherlands. There's a lot of situations like this where there's just random fields which belong to Belgium because that's just how things were decided at the very end. So that's the very loose situation. Again, when you dive into it too far, it's like, oh my god, how did land ownership even work before borders? And the simple answer is it got very confusing. So the nowadays consequences is the fact that there is a village where you can drive back and forth between Belgium and the Netherlands non-stop. And you might think this is a real issue. And if, like one of the ways to kind of like show that like, oh, this must be such a hard thing is the fact that they put little land borders on here just so you can see when you're crossing from Belgium into the Netherlands and vice versa. There are different laws that apply. There are different taxes. A different emergency service has to get you. There's a different, parcel service, a different letter service. The post comes from a different person. You might feel like, oh my god, that must be like so ridiculous to live there because you've got to be so careful of jumping over the borders. But the truth is, because Belgium and the Netherlands, having started as the same country, kind of ever since this border has existed, it's been a pretty lax one to say the least. And it kind of necessarily has to be that way, but even though it is a lax border and most people cross over it, it leads to some very weird edge case scenarios, such as the fact that all of the fireworks stores are inside of Belgium. Belgium has much laxer firework laws than the Netherlands does, so a lot of people cross from the Netherlands into this village just to buy some fireworks. There's a fireworks store here, there's a fireworks store here, there's a fireworks store up here, there's also tobacco stores and stuff like that, whereas a lot of restaurants would be on the Dutch side, for most of their business, and then for whenever, Dutch whenever Dutch business hours forced them to close their store, they'd switch over to a table on the Belgium side. It's a very real thing that lots of houses were divided between the two sides, and it mostly just came down to like, okay, so who do they belong to? Where the door is, so for instance, this this is the weirdest one, by the way, where the door is determines where, even though a lot of this house is on the Belgian side, this is a Dutch house, and this is this is actually a really weird edge case scenario. I believe it's where most of the door is, so this would be a, this would be a Belgian house, even though, again, a lot of their house is inside the Netherlands, and this is a a Netherlands flat, even though a lot of their stuff would be inside of Belgium. It's a weird situation, it's a confusing situation, but the truth is it doesn't actually matter so much. Again, like I said, there is no immigration requirement between the two countries. They have different taxes, they have different laws, but in this place, they'll be enforced when they need to. It's not like, they're actively searching the village, trying to deal with it, because it's just too tricky an issue. And you might think, well, I mean, crossing these borders must be hard because you've got to keep track of it all the time. No, the truth is, even though there are borders everywhere, if you look along the pavement, they've tried to mark a bunch of them, like we were just at. Even though there's these borders everywhere, which you can always see because they're marked by these little crosses, like we just had right here, you might think, oh, that's such a nightmare to deal with. No, this was actually set up by the, Bal-Hertog and the Bal-Hertog government, because the reason they've never fixed this issue, despite the fact that it's ridiculous, how are you going to get to a piece of, How are you going to get to a piece of Netherlands inside of Belgium, inside of the Netherlands? It's, it's ridiculous. The reason they've never fixed them is because both of the, villages realize it's a big boost for tourism. They put up all those markers there just to help tourists have that fun moment of like, oh, I'm in Belgium. Oh, I'm in the Netherlands. It's not something that affects the villagers' lives on a real day-to-day basis, and I think that's kind of a fun thing, personally. The fact that it doesn't necessarily become something that they care about. Like, when if you ever are to go there and you look at the border, you'll see people cross it entirely fine every single day. It looks like it goes for a parking lot here, which is very bizarre. So yeah, long story short, there's parts of Belgium inside the Netherlands, and there's parts of the Netherlands inside of Belgium inside the Netherlands. There's 20 of parts of Belgium inside the Netherlands, and there's 8 in return, just to be precise. And it doesn't really bother the people that live there very much at all. It's just like, it's a fact of life for them that they're in this weird blurred state between borders, and that's a thing that you perhaps weren't aware of before. So, moving on from there, we have the rest of the Belgian-Dutch border. So, again, like I said, most of the border between the two countries is drawn basically along religious lines from 1830. The Catholic, parts of the country became Belgium, and the non-Catholic parts were up there. But one of the big exceptions to this is the salient, or the panhandle, of, Maastricht and the region around it, which was known as Limburg. And they actually have their own language. It's a whole fun thing. But today we're not talking about Dutch languages. I just wanted to mention there is a panhandle here, and it is a very strange thing to me, because when I heard panhandle, it's just a word in my head, but when I first heard it explained, it made a bunch more sense, and it made me realize why panhandles are both weird and why they're called that. But they're called panhandles because it's like a pan, a large part with a small bit detached, and that's what a frying pan is like. And this is like one of the things where I realized, like, I just don't understand words. I am not a functional human being, but that is why it's called a panhandle, and now you know. At least now I know, and now you know too. So with that said, let's... I mean, I guess I live in a country with a panhandle. Let's hit you at some point, but I didn't know that. But let's talk about the panhandle. How did this come to be? And it came to be because when the North-South divide essentially made the Netherlands North and Belgium South divide, the people in Limburg, and specifically the lords, the duchies, I believe, of the Maastricht city, they were loyal to the crown, even though they were Catholic majority. And to this day, Maastricht has a huge Catholic majority, and the regions around it, they all have the same kind of thing, where they are Catholics and not Protestants, but yet they decided to join the Netherlands and stay with the Netherlands because their, lords stayed loyal even during those revolts, and therefore, as a result, the border between Belgium and the Netherlands here is based on the borders of the Maastricht city, which leaves this weird situation where it's like, it follows this river and then clearly includes a city that doesn't look like it should be included, because this is the city boundaries, the city limits for Maastricht right there. So Maastricht, you might have heard of it somewhere else, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but it's famous for the Maastricht Treaty. It is the official treaty that turned the European Union from being the European community, just a bunch of countries that are trading with each other, to being like an official country-style thing, where they made the flag, they agreed to ever closer union, they gave it even a motto, fun fact. All of that, an anthem is what I'm thinking about. All of these things came from the Maastricht Treaty, and the reason they chose Maastricht is because it is such a wild country of, again, it basically is, even though they're mostly Dutch people, they have that clear connection with the Netherlands. They've been invaded by Germany so many times, as you might imagine, and they have just a very international feel that doesn't quite match any country. And again, it's very clearly Dutch today, but it has that not quite perfectly Dutch feel, which is something that makes it like somewhere you might want to visit. So speaking of Maastricht, the border just south of it, Google Maps shows the old border, so I can show you like an old-new comparison. This is what the old border looked like between Belgium and the Netherlands. This is the border they've had since the two countries formalized their relationship in 1843. Again, when Belgium seceded, the Netherlands didn't recognize it for a solid 13 years afterwards, and when they did finally recognize them, they agreed on this border right here, which made sense at the time, but nowadays doesn't make very much sense. And the reason for that is because it leads a part of the Netherlands, which you can only access from Belgium. It leads a part of Belgium you can only access from the Netherlands, this part right here, and it leads another part of the Netherlands, which is only accessible from Belgium. So you can see 1 over here, 2 over here, 3 is my point. So Belgium has land on the Netherlands side, Netherlands has land on the Belgium side, and Belgium has... it's complex to say, but you get the point. The land doesn't match up with where it's accessible from, which meant all 3 of these zones were lawless. So OpenStreetMap actually has a convenient thing where it shows the new border, because they update a little bit more liberally with their borders. So here's what the new border looks like. As you can see, perfectly straight. Look how straight and curvy and smooth that border is compared to this right here, where it juts in, juts out, juts in, which now means that the relevant authorities can reach the land of the country that they need to be administering. Because obviously Belgian police can't be going into the Netherlands to enforce their laws because they're not valid there, and so on and so forth. They've now fixed that. Here's the new, and here's the old. Personally, fun fact, by the way, use OpenStreetMap if you want to see, like, up-to-date stuff. They'll change things even as they're happening, which is a good thing sometimes, whereas Google Maps is more conservative, just in case it changes back. They wait somewhere between 6 months to a year to officially change it. So, yeah, soon this will change on Google Maps, but it is official right now. It's just Google Maps is sometimes outdated to make sure it's more stable than anything else. So, yeah, with that said, let's move on to, because there's also, like, a whole political element to changing maps, but let's move on to, talking about the rest of their border, which, like I said, this entire salient just comes down to the fact that, like the whole province of Limburg, at least Dutch Limburg, I should clarify. A fun fact is there's actually there's two Limburgs. There's a Limburg which is now part of the Netherlands, and there is a Dutch Limburg. There is a Belgian Limburg. The Belgian Limburg is smaller, technically speaking, and there's less population there. But it is worth mentioning Limburg was split in two by the split. So with that said, let's move on to the Belgium-Dutch German tri-point. I've spoken about it so many times, so I won't do it too much here. Just in case you've heard that and you're like, Toycat, you can only talk about this tri-point so much. But fun fact, I recorded a video here, like in person. I've been here, jumped into Belgium, jumped into Netherlands, jumped into Germany. They have a tri-point border. It's very friendly today because they're all Schengen nations. You can just hop here. You can go in and out. It's really fun. It's a fun place to go. They've got a big viewing tower next to it as well. And yeah, it's a cute little thing, right, in my opinion. So yeah, that is Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands. It actually used to be a quadrupoint border. The world's only quadrupoint, arguably speaking, because of neutral Morsnet. I made a whole video about how that came to be, again as well. I don't want to repeat too many things here, because again, if you watch those videos, you'll be like, well, Toycat, it's fun hearing your other videos on repeat. And yeah, because even though this video is going to be a long one, I at least like to have some unique information going on there. So yeah, with that said, it's also worth mentioning that they're right next to here, right next to their tri-point, there is a Belgian-German connection. This is from Frankfurt to Brussels. The train line roughly runs, so Aachen through to Brussels as well, you can say. But basically, yeah, there is a train line connection between the two countries, and we'll bring that up later a little bit. So, yeah, with that said, let's move on from that to the rest of the Belgium-Germany border. So this border has changed quite a few times, actually. The most recent time, in fact, the reason is the one that led to the fact that, sorry, wrong thing right there. It led to the fact that there is a German-speaking community inside of Belgium. Why does Belgium have a German-speaking community? And the long story short on that one is the fact that after World War I, fun fact, this is a very little known historical fact, Germany did some bad things, a couple of times actually, in the 20th century. They're known as War I and War II, that's their very official names, and after one of those said wars, Belgium got to take some land from Germany. However, the people that lived in that land were Germans, and although there was some attempts by the Belgians to, kind of make them into Belgian people, speak French, etc., it never really succeeded, and to this day, there is a German-speaking community. They have their own parliament in Eupen over here, and it's just a very strange situation where this border was decided after World War I just to give some land to Belgium in exchange for the fact that, Germany did some very bad things, and Germany especially did some very bad things to Belgium. So that's the reason for that one right there. But the reason for this border right here, this snake border, this isn't just the weirdest conference in the world where Belgium was just like, we want a railway-shaped line, go in for your thing. We want a snake border because it'd be cool on maps, and 160 years later, maybe, or 60 years later, maybe some British dude will talk about it, someday. But no, the reason this exists is actually very bizarre because it's a German. So the reason that Belgium has a strip of land in between Germany and Germany is because Prussia, a part of Germany that later became Germany, built railways pretty much first on the European continent. Of all the German states, Prussia was the one to really drive home the railways and connect stuff together. And one of the railways they built, later came mostly into Belgium hands because, again, Belgium existed and etc. And as a result of that, and as a result of the fact that Belgium needed to operate this railway, despite the fact that it went a little bit through Germany afterwards, because, again, most of the land that the railway was on was a part of Belgium, but not the railway. So they decided, to make things a little bit better, they would give, the land which it was on to Belgium. And it's a very weird situation, which means that there's a railway, or was formerly a railway, I should say, that existed here, but it gave an entire weird strip of land that cut bits of Germany off from other bits of Germany. Officially speaking, there was no real issues, like you just cross over Belgium real quick. But it did lead to this very weird thing where lots of Germans were cut off from their country. 6 separate parts of Germany, in fact, are entirely cut off from other parts, including this one, which is my favorite like tiny little field. It's just like this man lives on a German field and he has to cross over Belgium to get back to Germany. But yeah, so the weird thing about this border though is the fact that it made sense when Belgium had a railway which went through Germany and they wanted sovereignty of the railway, right? Like, you might think it's weird, but it's a thing that they wanted. But nowadays it doesn't make any sense at all, because in 2001 they stopped running services. Then 6 years later, like, I don't know why they went like so fast, like we'll never need it again, but 6 years after they stopped running services, they're like, let's dismantle the track. They dismantled the track, and now the Venbahn, as it was then known and is now sort of known, is now a cycle pathway. So there is a cycle path which goes in between Germany and Germany, where you can stay in Belgium entirely. Why would you want to do that? Maybe one of those people who hates Germany and you're like, I'm gonna refuse to go through their territory, but I need to be near here. Then the Venbahn is perfect for you. And yeah, they also recently, both the Belgian and the German governments, they made a collective statement saying, yeah, even though there's no railway line in there anymore, we're not gonna alter the borders. We don't really have an interest in doing that. And yeah, I guess maybe they just like that it's a wacky thing. Maybe it's like the two villages where they think like some people might want to bike down there just because it's weird. But to me, it just leads to one of the weirdest situations that you can't even see on, like, again, when you look at a map like this, you can't see it. You zoom in a little bit more and you're like, oh, that looks a bit odd. What's the deal with that? But yeah, it is one of the thinnest borderlines in the world. It gets as small as 5 meters at some point. It leads to stuff like this. It leads to, like seriously, just to quickly show you, in case you don't believe me when I say 5 meters, I think it's about 10 here. 13 meters from one side of the border to the other. It is absurdly short, and that's because it was a railway line which had sovereignty of Belgium and weird stuff. So yeah, that is the Belgian-German border, all decided by treaties where Belgium got a bit of German land, which leads to, again, the weird situation where all the people living in all of the border cities speak German, including in this salient of Belgium, which is Oren right here, entirely German-speaking. There's a famous German castle. Should go sometime if that's your thing. There's also Oberhausen, which just means overhouse, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, with that said, let's move on from the very weird situation of the Belgium-German border, which is, again, a very recent creation as far as borders do go, especially in Europe. It's talking about the Belgian-Luxembourg border. So you might assume this is the friendliest border in the world, but the fun thing about this border is that Belgium, Belgium is one of those countries that I guess seems to have expanded on all sides. Belgium actually, took part of Luxembourg very recently, and in fact, if you are to ask about, what's the biggest Luxembourg in the world, like this is like a question. If you're that guy who likes to like troll his friends and be like, so hey guys, I'll give you a fiver if you can guess what's the biggest Luxembourg in the world, and they're like, I know you don't mean Luxembourg, because otherwise you wouldn't ask the question. And then you go, haha, you're wrong, it's Luxembourg, Belgium. So yeah, the biggest part of Luxembourg is actually not inside of Luxembourg, the sovereign independent state. It is a province inside of Belgium, inside of Wallonian Belgium. And the reason this exists is because after Belgium got their independence, there is a decent, French part of Luxembourg, because Luxembourg people speak Luxembourgish, which is arguably a German dialect, whereas a lot of people in Luxembourg spoke French. The French-speaking regions, the French-speaking majority regions, all became part of Luxembourg, Belgium. So yeah, they basically annexed part of Luxembourg, which was, I know, I guess it's a bad thing for Luxembourg, but nowadays they're very successful. I guess they're not bitter about it. It doesn't come up. And all three countries, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, are all friendly enough that I guess it's water under the bridge. But it is just still one of those fun things that like, hey, this border exists because Belgium took half of Luxembourg away, more than half of Luxembourg away, and this is just the parts which still spoke majority Luxembourgish. By the way, you can call the official name for Luxembourg people is Luxembourgers, and I love that. It's perfect. So yeah, that is Belgium, Luxembourg. This is their border. It's very strange, but it exists along, language lines again, because, this line was drawn along religious reasons, this one was drawn along language reasons, and this one was drawn along who did something bad and needs to pay back reasons. So the final border we have is between Belgium and France, right? And the weirdest thing about this border is it seems to be horrifically uninteresting. I spent a lot, I do a lot of border research. A lot of borders are just interesting by themselves. Like, hey, fun fact, look at this. Like, you don't need to know anything about this to know, like, what the heck? Oh my god, ha ha ha, funny, crazy. But the Belgium-France border really comes back to, it's not actually one decided between Belgium and France. It was decided between France and Austria, if you can believe that. That's right, Austria used to own something called the Austrian Netherlands, and it's one of these bizarre facts of history that Austria owned a lot of the Netherlands, but they put no effort into defending it, and they really didn't even want it. Again, that's why they didn't put effort into defending it. So there was something called the Austrian Netherlands, and there was something called France. Oh, well, I mean, you're familiar with France. And the way their two borders were determined is the fact that France got a lot of the Austrian Netherlands at one point, and then, end of Napoleon's reign, and they lost their land back, and nowadays that forms the border. Again, it's It's not too wildly interesting. It's a very soft border. It's one of the softest borders in Europe, in fact. And in fact, because I love metros that go across border, the Lille metro doesn't quite, this is the city of Lille. It's a major French city. The Lille metro doesn't quite go across the Belgian border, but it does go very close because there is, Tourcoing and there is Roubaix right here. And you can go right across because the Lille metro goes all the way out to here. This is the furthest stop along. And I've actually done this in person. That's why I'm mentioning this. But you can obviously cross the Belgian border from here to there. It's a 20-minute walk, so do this sometime if you ever find yourself in Lille and you want to see the instant, like, what it looks like to cross the border in Europe, because there is no police control. Even though France patrols their borders sometimes, because terrorism reasons or whatever, this is what it looks like. You cross from Belgium into France, you can't really see it. You just walk across. You don't even know officially the exact point you're in Belgium. Again, I did it once and I was just like, this is odd. And the only real way you can actually tell you've changed country is because Belgium is known for having terrible roads, whereas France is known for having okay to good roads, so you can just see like the immediate like road quality degradation that happens as you go across. And also you'll see tobacco and fireworks shops. It literally is just that. It's like tobacco, betting, fireworks. It was a pretty sad place. Like I walked all the way down the street just because I was like, oh, I'm in Belgium now. But yeah, it's most border towns like this are not actually too interesting. They're places sustained by that. Also, I think I needed to get some food and I asked for it and they only spoke I think they only spoke Dutch. Like, they didn't even speak French, because I tried my French skills there too. And I don't know, if you live on the French, like the French-Belgian border, I just feel like, you should know French, right? Maybe? No? Okay. With that said, just a mini story. That brings us almost to the end of borders. It's worth mentioning, a lot of people forget that Belgium has coast because it has a very small stretch of coast. It's only about 70 kilometers wide. In fact, let's get some exact measuring going on here today. So the border is roughly, again, 65 to 70, once you include all of the little alcoves. And the really interesting thing about their sea border is not anything they do with it, because there is a lot of trade that goes on with Belgium and the outside world, mostly done through the Flanders province. Fun fact. Something like 2/3 of all Belgian exports come from Flanders. But the interesting thing about this thing to me is the fact that you have this huge seaside. There's a huge seaside going pretty much from coast to coast. And the reason that's so fascinating is because they built something called the beach tram. It's called the beach coastal tram, something like that. It's got a Belgian name. But the interesting thing about this beach tram is it goes all the way from Nokhuis all the way down to here in Japan, which means that there is a roughly 70-kilometer long tram line. It is the longest tram line in the world. In case you want to see it, like, here is the tram stop right there. Like, I don't know how, like, you can see the little icons, the little trams, right? This is hard to show off in this video right here, but they have the longest tram line in the world. It goes from there to there, 70 kilometers, and it's every 10 minutes, in summer at least, to go from one side to the other. So yeah, you can cross the entire Belgium coast. It's effectively a tram because you can walk from, the Netherlands to the tram, and then you can walk from France to the tram in about 10-15 minutes. It's basically a tram which takes you from France to the Netherlands. That's pretty cool, right? Or maybe it's just me. With that said, though, this is near the end of the video. This is where we just go over, like, fun little, I guess not really border facts, but also border facts. So, personal experience, I wanted to mention this early in the video to, like, show my credentials as a Belgian border aficionado. But fun fact, actually, is that I've actually crossed all of Belgium's land borders. So I've crossed from Belgium into the Netherlands via train. I've crossed from Germany into Belgium and Belgium into Germany via train, something like 10 times in between them. I've crossed from, France into Belgium, both by train and in person, just... It was quite sad, as I mentioned, but it's something I've done. And I've also crossed from Luxembourg into Belgium as part of like a Benelux trip. Because, fun fact, the Benelux nations are actually very, very close together. So, Benelux, if you can't work it out, is B-E-N-E, Lux. For some reason, Luxembourg is the smallest country, but they get most of the name. But yeah, the three countries, because they have this history as the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, they are very, very close today. They even have their own parliament. They're the three founding members of the EEC, now the EU. They have no border controls, no custom controls. They have similar history, similar past. And yeah, as a result of that, it's, again, like they have their own parliament and they make their own rules. One day, if it's advantageous, they might be one state. And they even have the flag prepared just in case that happens. And I love this flag just because look at that lion. That is a lion that is like I think it's a lion. I'm pretty sure it's a lion. But that is a lion that is upset to be a lion. It looks like it got frozen like Alfred's own will, and it's like, kill me, kill me. And personally, I like that a lot personally. So yeah, Benelux, very real thing. I feel like I have to mention it right here. All three of these countries might one day remove their borders and become one, but the EU effectively means they don't need to. However, even though there is like this merger thing that might happen, it's, again, I'm realistically talking as a very low thing. Something that does have a very real possibility is Belgium splitting up into three separate countries. because again, there is a Flemish part of the, there is a Dutch part of the Netherlands, there's a French part, and they really have issues getting along, like, non-stop, and then Brussels is just chilling by itself, being a pretty successful city. So yeah, that is a real dividing factor. A lot of people just feel like awkward roommates. It doesn't feel like there's a national identity, besides, I guess, when football is going on, right now, it doesn't really feel like a national identity to them. It feels like two national identities. It's vaguely familiar to, like, in England, Scotland, and Wales, except I guess we don't have issues forming coalitions because England is the largest of all of them. So it's a similar thing, and it is a genuine problem that might come up. Also, because this is just like fun side notes at the end, right? I like this. Should we do this more often? Let's talk about the Belgian colonial empire, because a video series I used to do a lot of is the empire of insert country here, the remaining like colonial remnants. And although Belgium doesn't still have an empire, I wanted to go over their empire at its peak, because you might be like, how much of the world did Belgium own? Because, you know, it seems like it might be a lot. Let me show you Belgium's empire at its peak. It is, it is one big blob, and then Belgium. So there's Belgium, there's its big blob. So technically speaking, at its very peak, they also had Burundi, and Rwanda, sorry. It was called something different. It was like Burundi. Basically, they had two other tiny countries right there, but they're mostly famous for having one colony. And I really want to bring this up because a lot of people try to say colonialism is the big no-no word in the world now, right now. Like, oh, that's the bad thing. You don't want to be a colonialist. And I don't want to say colonialism is good. If you want to say neocolonialism is good, again, that's not really something that is a-okay, but to say all colonialism ever was bad is, I mean, especially if you're talking about the British, which there was a lot of benefits, I feel like one of the best examples that no one ever criticizes, because again, people criticize the British, the French, Americans, this all the time, but something wild is that Belgium's colonialism, they took over Congo, again, as you can see from this map right here, and it wasn't actually a Belgium thing, it was their king, technically. So, first of all, their king just personally owned this huge swath of land. Just like one dude personally owned the country. That's a real thing. Again, look into it. And while he was personally in charge of what is now the DRC, he actually, he chopped off something like half the hands in the country. He killed half the population, in fact. I think that's a mixed up statistic, but he killed half the people. He chopped off an absurd number of hands. And you might say, oh, an absurd number of hands, like what, like 50,000 hands? No, we're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of hands chopped off. How many hands can you chop off? Why would you chop off that many hands? Pretty rude thing to do, but he did it to try and motivate them to work faster. And a lot of the DRC's problems, not all of them obviously, a lot of them are to do with that colonial reign. And I'm just saying, like, there are a lot of countries in Africa doing quite well these days. A lot of countries around the world, former colonies, doing really, really well. And I'm just saying that, like, just because you can't group all of that together. To group in chopping off hands with, oh yeah, well, we took them over for a bit and taught them language, which is now useful for global trade. I just feel like it's a little bit of a false comparison to call it all one thing. There is bad colonialism, and there is either better. It might not be good yet, but it's not at least as bad, and that's my controversial view for today, at least. And also, controversial opinion right here, but if you are able to visit Belgium, because there are lots of reasons to, it's a lot of what you might picture when you picture Europe. Don't go to Brussels. Brussels is the easiest airport to fly into, so you totally should, or at least one of Brussels airports is easy to fly into. Don't fly into Charleroi. But Brussels airport is really, really easy to fly into, so if you're flying from another continent, it might be the easiest one to get to. However, Brussels is a city I don't personally like. I go there a lot, like I said, between London and... because I have crossed the Belgian border more times than I've crossed the UK border in terms of a land border, so fun fact. But every time I go to Germany, if by train, I cross over in Brussels. So I've seen Brussels a lot of times, mostly for 24 to 48 hours. And every time I go, I'm like, this is kind of cool. And I look around and it's like, it's nice looking, but there's not really too many great things. And I think the best way to sum this up is the fact that one of the most famous things you know about Belgium, or about Brussels, is about mannequin piss, right? So, mannequin piss, that's real name, not like a weird thing. It's like a famous statue of a baby pissing, you know, like, oh, I want to go see that. Right? Like, sounds amazing. But let me show you what it actually looks like. So this is mannequin piss, and it's like, oh, this is so nice. Here's a better example of mannequin piss. It is literally a child, like, it's the size of a baby doll, and there's just a tiny stream coming out. You know, he's pissing, if you will, and you know, it's such a tiny corner thing. It's in this case, it's surrounded by building works, like it was for me, and there's just hundreds of people surrounding it, being like, "Oh, I'm gonna get a selfie." Like, people surrounding things, trying to get a selfie. You know, that's a problem that you might not care about anywhere. But the fact that it is that way, and the fact that, like, I don't know, it's, to me, it's just like, why is this? This is the most popular attraction in Brussels. If you're gonna visit Belgium, just visit another region of Belgium. Even if you like big cities, like I do, Antwerp. If you don't like big cities, there's Bruges, there's Ghent. Charleroi is actually meant to be nice by itself. There's Mons. There's Liege, which is like high up on my to-go list, next to Maastricht, which is also up there. I'll do that sometime. And there's also, by the way, Spa, which is most famous not for having a spa, as far as I'm aware, but for having the Spa racetrack, which is one of the most famous in the world also. Again, I don't care about racing. I know about the Spa racetrack. And yeah, with that said, that is Belgium. That is its borders. That is Benelux and the weird combination of nations going on there. And there is your official visit with Toycat advice. Let me know if you got something from that. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I know it's like super long, but the truth is I feel like long form videos, as long as you're not saying the same thing over and over again, which I hope I don't do too often, I feel like there is a benefit to them because you can watch them and you can learn a lot more. You can condense information down, but only to a certain point, and there's a lot of small things you have to like throw away, and that's fine, you know, throwing away things is good to make a condensed thing, but this isn't necessarily meant to be that. And I hope you all enjoyed this. Leave some feedback in the comments because I'm responding there. Or also, if you want to leave feedback and get direct to me, because I don't respond to every comment, I don't even, you know, like reading all the comments can be tricky sometimes. But if you want to get direct feedback to me, reddit.com/r/toycat. And if you want to support the channel, because a lot of people like express this thing of like, how do we do that? And again, even though people are asking about Patreon, and maybe someday I should just give in, because you know there are a lot of benefits to Patreon. But one thing I try to push at least while I can, you know, like while I have the luxury of not necessarily needing, you know, Patreon, I'm gonna try not to use it until I need to. But one of the things that I have the, so therefore I have the luxury of being able to push is Flatter. So Flatter is just a service where it basically, instead of just fixing my problems, like, you know, I have money issues with YouTube because trying to do that sort of thing, that's not your problem though. If you want to fix all of the issues of all the people you watch, where you either support with an ad and give them a fraction of a penny, or you don't support them at all if you have an ad blocking service, Flatter is a way to just drop $10 a month, or something like that. You throw your $10 a month down, and then it splits it between the creators you want to show it between. So giving $1 a month to 10 separate creators is literally, it's the equivalent of watching something like 1,000 videos, or like 600 videos, or it's like watching a lot of videos in terms of ad revenue, and it's a much bigger contribution than you can make through ads alone to just donate $1, $2, $3 to a bunch of different people. So there you go, flatter.com/IBXToycat. Always going to promote it, link down below. And on the Patreon thing, thank you to everyone who would support me if I had one. I'm going to try my hardest for now not to, and then we'll see how things progress, because, again, this is kind of like the fun side project right now, but we'll see how that goes. For now, I hope you'll enjoy the video. Second channel, do care. Goodbye.